Welcome back to the Life You Love podcast. On the last Friday of every month, we release these bonus Q&A episodes answering all of your questions from our episodes from that month. This month, we've had so many conversations around designing your dream life, filling your calendar, increasing your income, and more. So in today's Q&A, we are getting to all of your questions.
You guys came in really, really clutch with all the questions this month. You always do. You always leave really, really good ones in Spotify, but there were so many in Spotify this month. And
Yeah, we were
can
saying that our comments on our episodes in general have just been, you guys have been leaving so many good
yes.
comments. Just like all of our episodes have at least 10 comments on them, I feel like, which is
Yeah.
amazing. So
It
we
is
love
so
listening to
fun.
them.
It really is. It's so fun for us to read the comments because, like, on our socials, we can see the comments on each of the videos, obviously, but on Spotify, it's a little bit different. So we love when you all leave comments and everything, especially when they are questions for our Q&A episodes. Okay, let's get into question one. Question one is, how do you get over the fear that life is passing you by and you're not where you want to be?
I love this question. I feel like we all kind of have this feeling that time moves so much faster the older that we get, especially now that I'm entering my late 20s. I look
Yeah.
back and I feel like I've lived like 10 different lives so far in
Same.
my 20s, which is crazy. But I think it can also be kind of scary being like, okay, well, I'm X years old and I thought I would be here by then, but now I just kind of feel like life is passing me by. And as this question said, how do you get over that? And we've been having conversations around this on the podcast in a couple of our past episodes, especially in last week's episode where we were talking about how to intentionally fill your calendar. And I think the overarching kind of theme is you really do need to create your experiences. Experiences aren't just going to fall into your lap, right? And when we think about our dream life, we are really thinking about having more experiences and having these big experiences. I know for me, one really good example of this. So, when I was making my vision board at the beginning of 2026, I put Coachella on there, just like a photo of like
Okay.
the Coachella side, which is crazy because I'm so like, I don't even really necessarily have a desire to go to Coachella,
Yeah, I
right?
was like,
Like,
I'm like, if I mean, hey, if you go to Coachella, girl. But I'm like, Erin is so like introverted. Like she's like, I want to go back to the hotel by 9 p.m. So I'm like,
yes,
okay,
yes,
Coachella,
correct.
okay.
And I think when I did that, I wasn't even necessarily being like, "Oh my gosh, it's my dream to go to Coachella," but I was kind of just saying that I'm craving a little bit more in-person opportunities, especially in the creator space. I was saying to Grace a couple of weeks ago, I really want to like make more creator friends and more entrepreneurial friends and just, get out there more and have more experiences. So I put Coachella on my vision board. But then at the beginning of March, Grace and I created the experience for ourselves of going to South by Southwest, which is another different type of conference thing for creatives and entrepreneurs and all of that. And that was a situation where we had to create that experience. No one was knocking on our door saying, "Hey, come to South by Southwest. We're going to pay for everything." We had to create that experience and we went and we got to network with so many other creators. We made a bunch of friends. We saw a bunch of people in person that we haven't seen in years. I think that that's a good reminder that you do really have to create those experiences. If there's something on your vision board or something that would make you feel like you're living your dream life, you have to actually go out and make the effort to create the experience.
Yeah, this might sound really harsh, but when I saw this question, I'm like, the reality is that life is moving, whether you're moving with it or not. And I don't say this to like freak anyone out. And maybe this is sick of me. Maybe I need to like talk to my therapist about this. But I literally think about how, which is just like really random, but side note, when I was a kid and I was like, people were like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I had to, at one point I was like, I want to be a fashion designer, which is so funny knowing my whole fashion sense journey. But I was like, I want to be a fashion designer or I want to do this or that. But then at one point, what I wanted to be when I grew up was 100. Like, I just was like, I want to be 100. Like, I want to live to be 100 years old, which, like, why?
That's so
Okay.
funny as a
Yeah.
kid. Like,
Like, okay, girl, like, come on now. But I always think about how when I turned 25, I was like, a quarter of the way through my life. And now, realistically, I am more than 25% of the way through my life. And I know that's like I told someone this before and they were like, don't say that. Don't say that. I'm like, no, like,
it's
it's
true.
true. And you have to be very real and recognize that and be like, my life is moving. Like, time is passing by. And I think that it's like sobering in a way, but I think it's good to kind of like sober ourselves with that fact and be like, okay, what do I want out of life? And how am I actually making sure that that happens? Because I think this like fear that life is passing you by and you're not where you want to be you can't control the passage of time. Time will continue to tick. What you can control is trying to be where you want to be. That's the portion that you can control. So, like, for me, something that's made me feel less, because I used to feel like life was just moving and I wasn't getting to what I wanted to do. What's helped me is like really, which is we talked about in the calendar episode, sitting down and really making sure that the things I say I want to do, I am putting in the calendar. And we do have a an episode coming up that's like our Q2 reset, so we can talk about that kind of stuff in that episode and how to like make sure that you're actually doing things this year, or like what figuring out what your goals are for the quarter and things like that. But I will literally look at, what do I want to happen this year? What do I want to happen in 5 years? And how am I making sure that I'm taking steps towards making those things happen so that whenever I arrive to that point in time, I'm not like, oh my gosh, how did all this time pass and I didn't even do the thing I said I wanted to do, which I'll probably talk about more in depth in the Q2 episode as well. But I decided I'm going to do this new thing where I'm calling it my big three. And every month, I'm going to pick three things that I make sure that I do, things that I said I wanted to do. So, like, I have said I've lived in St. Pete for 15 months now, and I've said that I want to go paddleboarding for 15 months. Have I done that? No. So, I think in April, one of my big three is going to be to go paddleboarding. One could literally be just to like drive to a new town and walk around and like whatever, look at nice houses or try a new beach, try a new coffee shop. It could be literally anything, but like picking three things that I'm going to do every month that at the end of the month, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do these fun things. Like, so I actually have things that I feel, you know what I mean? Like I'm actually doing things with my life and I don't feel like time is just like passing me by.
And I think what's hard about being an adult too is before this phase of our life, we always had something that we were working toward. But for a lot of people who are adults, they're settled into their careers. They're not really changing careers, or maybe you're working toward a promotion, but at the end of the day, your job is kind of monotonous and you're doing things day to day. You don't necessarily have a goal that you're working toward, and that's hard for people. You might feel like life is passing you by because you just feel like your day to day is very monotonous. And I feel like from that regard, you really have to reshape it from like, okay, how do I just make sure that I'm enjoying my day today and I'm making the most out of my day today? For example, instead of sleeping in until the very last minute and not having a morning routine, how do I make sure that I'm getting up on time to really have time for myself and go for a walk? And how do I make sure that my space is clean so that I'm enjoying relaxing after work instead of just kind of like rotting on the couch when everything is a mess? And how do I make sure that I'm seeing my friends consistently and all of that? I think you, as an adult, you have to really learn to just kind of enjoy the process and enjoy living your day to day life without looking ahead to what's next. Because at some point, like, yes, obviously we're going to have different life phases, but you can't really live your life in your 20s or in your 30s being like, well, I'm just looking ahead to the next phase of my life. You have to learn how to enjoy this phase of your life.
Yeah, I also think in this the second kind of part of this question of like the having this fear of, not being like where you wanted to be. I think if you fixate on that, on like, oh, I thought that I'd be married by now, or I thought that I would be at this point in my career by now. If you fixate on that, it will eat you alive. It will literally eat you alive. And I think there has to just be also like a conscious awareness of like, okay, I am fixating on that a lot. And every time I find myself fixating on it, I'm going to try to just like move my mind over to what's in my control and say, okay, like would I like to have found my person by now? Yes, I would have absolutely loved that. But if I focus on the fact that, I thought that I would have found my forever person by this age, if I just keep my mind focused on that, it's just going to make me upset. And it's also not in my control. So frankly, it's a waste of my time to be fixated on and feeling anxious about or whatever. So it's like, every time I find myself being like, I wish I found my person sooner, I'm like, how can I just continue to live my life to the fullest and trust that like it's going to fall into place when it's meant to? And I think that's also more fulfilling. But I think it has to be like a conscious process too of just pulling your mind away from that so you're not fixating and spiraling because it will eat you right up.
That actually transitions us super well to the next question. We're kind of jumping down in our list here, but we got another question where someone asked, when we go through setbacks, it wrecks your motivation and your self confidence. You will pick yourself up again and hit things again, but how to fast track it? So that was the question that we got. And I feel like this segues really well into this because what you just mentioned about that timeline, I think whenever we go through a setback in life, you really do have to remind yourself that it's only a setback because you made up a timeline in your head and it's a made up timeline. For example, the relationship conversation that you just mentioned. Okay, well, if you, let's say you're in a relationship for a couple of years and you guys break up. Okay, well, you're viewing it as a setback because you had a timeline in your head of being like, well, I was going to be married by whatever age you are now or a year from now. But that timeline is made up and you don't know what timeline you're supposed to be on. So it's viewing it as a setback is kind of, yeah, you're viewing it because of that made up timeline. And I feel like one thing that always helps me is, and this is hard because if you've never experienced it before, you kind of like don't have this proof for yourself. But I have gotten so many opportunities in my 20s to see how setbacks actually propel me into the life that I'm supposed to have. And now I don't view things as setbacks because I do have that proof. However, if you don't have that proof for yourself, that can be really hard. But just reminding yourself that, like, if you do have a setback, if you go through a breakup, if you get laid off at work, whatever it may be, a couple of years from now, you're going to realize that that setback actually did propel you to the life that you were supposed to live. For example, there's this creator that I follow. She was working at Google for the longest time, and then she got laid off from Google. And when she got laid off, she used it as an opportunity to start a vintage clothing store in New York City. And
Oh
now
my
she
gosh.
owns a vintage clothing store in New York City and it's super successful. And she posts
Aw.
a ton of her name is Nick Polina, Nik Polina, if anyone like wants to follow that type of content. But I just feel like that's such a good example of like you could view getting laid off at Google as a setback. And yes, she probably did. She was probably so sad that she got laid off from this
Mhm.
amazing job. She was probably making so much money at Google. But now she probably looks back and is like, thank God I got laid off at Google because I would never be where I'm supposed to be without that setback.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this question because I think if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know about the health struggles that I dealt with last year. And if you're new to the podcast, I was diagnosed with endometriosis in October and I found out through a surgery, which is the only way that they can formally diagnose it. And I had struggled for 12 years prior with daily chronic pain and it got to the worst it has ever been last year. So I moved to Florida in January of 2025, so like a little over a year ago, and I was so excited. I was like, I feel like I was at such a good place with my career. I was like, I'm moving to a new city. This is gonna be so fun. I like moved to this apartment I was like so in love with, super excited. And I was starting to like build community and have good routines. And I was feeling healthy, like in my body, my health was at a good spot. And then it was like, if probably right around exactly this time last year, things took like a sharp, sharp decline. And I had like unbearable nerve pain in my legs. I couldn't walk for more than like 15 minutes without it like causing flares and my legs killing me. And it was just like, it was horrific. It's like crazy to think about how I dealt with all of that and for the length of time last year. And I was so upset because it felt like such a setback. I'm like, I had such good momentum in my career and I was so excited and I had this like desire to do all these things, but I physically couldn't. And that was the most like frustrating feeling to feel almost like trapped in my life. And I knew I will get the motivation and the confidence and like I will get better and things will figure themselves out. But when you're in that situation, it's horrible. And I think now though, I am grateful for it. I would never want to do that again. I would never want to do last year again. I like never. But I'm grateful for it because I think setbacks hardly make sense in the moment. And I think that's what's really hard about them. Like when you're in them, it's hard to be like, why did this need to happen? I was moving forward. I felt like I was doing good. I could propel myself forward. You know, I didn't need a setback to do that. Like, why am I in this situation? But oftentimes you come out with some sort of lesson or healing that ends up being whether it informs you in a meaningful way in the immediate next step that you take, or if it's down the line, it does help you in some way or another. Even in my situation, I thought about just how like I hedged on getting the surgery that I needed because it was going to be like 10,000 plus dollars in cash because the surgeon didn't take my insurance and how I was like hedging on that. And I learned such a lesson of like, sometimes you just have to spend the money. And sometimes it's like, feels like a scary amount of money to spend, but like your health is so important. And like, don't wait because then it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And by the time I went for surgery, I was in like excruciating pain on the daily. And it was horrible. Also, just in like trusting my intuition, like I learned so much through that experience. I became stronger in my faith. I saw how my friends showed up for me. I learned about the connection just between my emotions and my finances so much. I will also say one thing that helped me get through that and has helped me get through any setbacks since then. When I was going through it, actually, one of my friends here, he left a comment on one of my videos and he said, I'm probably going to butcher this, but he said something along the lines of, the future you hoped for isn't the only future with hope. And I think it's a quote from
I love that.
someone else. I don't know where it comes from, but I was like, wait a damn minute. I was like, I love that. Because I think sometimes when we experience a setback, we're realizing that maybe the future that we were hoping for isn't going to pan out the way that we thought it was going to. But it's a good reminder that the future that you hope for isn't the only future with hope. Like there is another future that you can hope for as well. You just might get to it in a different way. And that for me helps me with kind of maintaining my motivation and confidence. And then just routines, staying in the routines that I know are healthy for me, even if maybe they're not my favorite routines ever. And that I think helps because we always talk about this in the podcast, doing what you say you're going to do and showing up for yourself builds confidence. So,
And what you said about learning lessons inherently through those quote unquote setbacks, I feel like that's such a good reminder on making mistakes is just part of life. And the mistakes can look like anything. A lot of times they probably will look like financial mistakes, like money that you kind of wish you didn't spend on something or whatever it may be. You're going to make mistakes in life.
mm,
And sitting there kind of like harping on the mistakes and viewing them as setbacks really is just a waste of time. You have to think of it as like, I'm just not going to make that mistake again in the future. This is like kind of a random example, but I was watching a TV show and the TV show was the girls were like based in college and the one girl just like made so many mistakes, right? And this one girl was giving her advice and was like, this period of time, I know it hurts right now, but years from now, you're going to look back at this. It's just going to be something that you don't like thinking about. Like, that's all
mm,
it's going to be. Like, the mistake, your life is going to go on. Life is full of mistakes. I've made so many, but every mistake does give you those lessons and it moves you closer toward the life that you want or the life that you're supposed to be living in the future. Another good example of this from me was I moved in with an ex-boyfriend like right out of college. I feel like I've talked about this on the podcast before, but this is the relationship that I got Bella with him. Like Bella Bella had a dad before. And we were living together and it ended horribly, literally so bad. A lot of money wasted, a lot of time wasted, friendships ruined. Like it definitely did explode. But looking back now, one, I learned so much about relationships through that. I think, yeah, everyone learns stuff in crappy relationships. We all need them. But then also, like, I wouldn't have Bella if I didn't have
mhm.
that situation. So, yeah, life is full of mistakes. You're going to make them and you can't view them as setbacks. You have to just move on. But with that, let's get into the third one. This is kind of switching gears here. The next two questions for this Q&A are more around like entrepreneurship, business, podcasts. This question says, can you share some other podcasts that you guys like? Your podcast is the only one that sticks for me for years. I can't get into anything else. Don't worry, not leaving you girls, but need some more to listen to.
First of all, I'm so flattered and honored. Yeah, I am so flattered and honored that this is one that sticks. You know what's funny about this comment is like I feel the same way. Not that I don't listen to our podcast beyond if I'm like editing the file or something or like
Sometimes I listen
whatever.
to them. I'm like, dang, we're doing good.
No, sometimes I will listen to little teeny tiny bits, but like usually I don't listen to the whole thing back just because I know what we already said. It's funny because we've been doing this for 2.5 years, almost three. I am not a podcast person. Like I don't listen to podcasts that much. I will say if I do listen to a podcast, it's usually like a reality TV type of podcast. Like I just watched, what is it, Love is Blind, and I've been watching the podcast interviews that the cast have done because I'm like, I want to know that I want to hear the behind the scenes. I want to like see these people talk about, I don't know, like stuff that I didn't get to see on the show. So I watch a lot of those kinds of podcasts. I do watch the occasional self-help podcast. And if I do, it's usually like Jay Shetty or I just discovered he's not a podcaster. He's like an entrepreneur, but his name is Jesse Itzler. He's the creator of the big ASS calendar. And he was hosting a party at South by Southwest. We didn't go. I was just like, he just like seems like a really cool dude. So I listened to a podcast the other day in the gym that he was on. So that's what I'll typically do. If I see someone that I think is like has something interesting to say, I'll try to find an episode of a podcast they might have been interviewed on. but I don't listen to Erin will send me, she'll be like, "Oh my gosh, this was such a good podcast. We should do something like this." And I like won't listen to it.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. I'm more of a podcast listener than Grace is. I listen to
Mhm.
podcasts in a bunch of different topics, like some maybe a little bit more like political ones. I've been really into like the Erica Kirk drama recently. I've been like
Okay.
watching a lot of YouTube videos and listening to a lot of podcasts on her. I want to know the scoop. I want to know what happened. But I also listen to like nutritional ones like Huberman Labs and all of that. But for this question specifically on podcasts kind of similar to us, quote unquote, it's a little bit hard. And the reason why it's hard is because I don't want to say Grace and I are like doing something incredibly unique here. However, I do think that we took a little bit of an intentional angle with this podcast that we kind of saw a little bit of a gap in the market from. And what I mean by that is we try to make this podcast a very good mix of chatty but actionable. And a lot of podcasts don't have that chatty direction to it because they don't have co hosts. It's usually one host and then maybe they'll bring on some guests to like interview the guest, right? But typically with that, you're getting a lot of like their backstory and then, yeah, some of their takeaways, but they're usually like plugging whatever they're a founder of and that kind of thing. Whereas since there's two of us, we want this to feel like you're just talking to a friend, but talking to your like advice giving friend or talking like we want you to take something away from our episodes, but we still want it to be chatty and we don't want you to feel like you have to take notes. And I do feel like we're doing a pretty good job of that. At least that's the feedback that we're getting. We're like really hitting our stride. But a couple other ones that I do feel like are kind of in the same lane. The first one is it's called Mindset, Magic, and Manifestation. It's like a mindset focused podcast. Like I listen to it in the gym. It just makes me feel really good. Like I try to start my weeks with it, right? Because it makes me feel very, very good, right? It makes me want to take action. The second one is called Makeshift Happen. This one is mindset focused, but a little bit more entrepreneurial. Most of her episodes are for like the business girl, the entrepreneurial girl, which I love. So if you're looking for that, that's a good recommendation. And then the third one is called Hot Smart Rich. She does a lot of interviews and she does a lot of like really cool interviews. So I would say those are the three. But
Yeah. I need to listen to podcasts more. I do because I listened to Jesse Itzler was on the Higher Up Wellness podcast and I listened to that one on Monday when I was in the gym and I was just like he's just so I don't know, his thoughts, the way he thinks is so interesting to me and I feel like I left being really motivated. So I'm like
mhm.
I need to listen to more
Diary of a
podcasts.
CEO is the other good one. And that book was
Yes.
amazing. That was like one of my favorite books that I read in 2025. So that's good. And the book is just called Diary of a CEO as well. But okay, let's get to the last question before we wrap up this episode. This one says, what's one thing that you both are looking forward to this year in business and in your personal life?
I put this question on here and then right before we got on and started recording, I was like, Erin, what am I looking forward to in business and in life? I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. What are
Okay.
you?
So I haven't shared this on my social media yet at all. So if you're listening to this, you're hearing it for the first time. I haven't shared it publicly anywhere, but as of a few weeks ago, I am officially a full-time content creator. I wound down operations on my freelance business and if anyone's curious about the decision behind that, maybe I can mention it in another episode, but it was time
It
and I
was
decided to
time.
wind things down. And there's more backstory to it, but I don't need to get into all of that unless you guys want to hear it. But I'm officially a full-time content creator. And I think, like, in terms of business, I just really see the vision with my brand on social media has always been so purpose driven. And I may have told the story on the podcast before, but I just, how in control of your life you feel is one of the number one indicators of your happiness level. And my purpose on social media has always been to help people feel more in control of their life so they can live a happier life. And I do it by talking about what I want to gain control of in my life, which is my little thing in my bio of happy, healthy, hot, and rich. I want to be happy, I want to be confident, and I want to, be rich and do all the things. Rich meaning just I'm not saying I want to be a billionaire, okay? But some money would be nice, you know? But I want to do all these things, right? And I want to like share how I'm creating that life for myself. And I think just having my page be so like purpose driven for me and I don't know, just seeing how it's built over the last few months, I was just feeling like if I could put all my energy into it because freelancing was taking a substantial amount of time because that was a whole other business basically in itself. If I could put all my energy into social media, I think it can be like massive and I think I can create massive impact. And I prayed about it and I talked to people about it, and things just like fell into place in ways that like, this is just all signs are pointing in the right direction here that I need to go and do this. And so I made that choice. So I'm excited to see, I think, where that goes this year. I think that's my like looking forward to in business. And then I think in personal, I'm just looking forward to like doing a lot more, putting a lot more things on the calendar. I have some travel plans with my friend that I'm really excited about, some solo trips I'm going to go on. And I would love to buy a house this year. We'll see. I am not liking any of the homes that I'm seeing in St. Pete. I'm like, these are all so ugly. And I don't know what to do
Okay,
about
it is
that. But
hard going from a luxury apartment to a
it is.
house
Oh my
as someone who
gosh.
bought new construction because I felt the same way.
I'm like, I might have to move out to the suburbs and buy new construction because I'm looking at these homes and I'm just like,
I love the suburban life.
I'm like,
I'm
why?
here.
The only thing is the suburbs in St. Pete, they don't start to get
Mm.
cheaper or like more affordable until you go like 30 minutes outside the
Oh
city.
yeah.
And
It's
I'm
not
like,
it's still expensive.
yeah. But I'm like, I don't want a house that has like the kitchen is literally like 10 square feet. I'm like, be
Mhm.
serious.
Yeah.
So we have to figure that out. But I'm not pressed about it, but I would like to, but I'm only going to buy something if I see something I like
Yeah.
and in a location I like. So those are my things I'm excited about.
Love that. Okay, mine, I feel like I don't have a great answer for this either on the business side. I was talking to Alex about this last night though. I feel like this is the first year business wise, like really since college when I started posting on social media. I feel like this is the first year that I really want to allow myself to just kind of like, I don't want to say coast, but like only take on things that I'm like very excited about and allow myself the opportunity to not take on things that I'm not excited about. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that I have reached like the state of maturity in like what I'm doing to where I can nurture it, but I don't necessarily need to push and push and push and feel pressure. And if I am busy one day and I don't post anything or I'm not as productive, like I just want to be okay with that. And that's
Mhm.
like it's easier said than done because I think that we're wired to push and push and push. But I think that I'm excited to see what will happen when I take the pressure off of myself a little bit in 2026 because on the personal side, I have a lot that I'm looking forward to. I talked about in our last Q&A, maybe in our last Q&A, one of the episodes that we did recently. So Alex got deployed, which is terrible.
Yeah.
But we went and looked at engagement rings, which I
Oh,
have not talked about.
you
I
didn't even
didn't
tell
talk
me
I know.
this.
Well, we like haven't really
Girl.
caught up. But yeah, we went and looked at engagement rings. So that time is quickly approaching and we don't want to be engaged for long, like no more than 6 months. We kind of just want to get married. Like I'm just ready to be married to him. So that's like what I'm looking forward to. I feel like I'm looking forward to like way more things on the personal side than the business side, if I'm being
Girl,
totally honest.
you're going to end this year a whole wife.
I
That's
know. What the
crazy.
heck? Am I
That's
old enough for
crazy.
that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I know. I'm like, wow. Like, can you do that? You're like,
Yeah,
you're of legal
I
age to do
can.
that.
I
It's so
know.
crazy. It's just like life. I don't know. I feel like this, like, in your 20s, all of a sudden, it's like you feel still so young because you are young, but then you're like, whoa, like, I can buy a whole house. I can get
Yeah.
married. You know what I mean?
I was talking
It's
to
weird.
my best friend from high school is pregnant right now. And I was
Oh
with
my
her the other
gosh.
day and I was like, were you nervous to tell your mom? And she's fully married. Like I was
Yes.
a bridesmaid in her wedding in the fall. And I was like, were you nervous to tell your mom? Because like I would feel like a teen mom if I got
Yes.
pregnant.
Which I'm like, why?
She's like,
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
No, yeah, it does feel so weird, which again, we're fully at the age where that is an appropriate thing to be doing. But for some
Mhm.
reason, I still sometimes feel like I am so young. I'm like, I need to tell my mom what I'm doing. Like, if I'm, gonna buy a house, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna do that. I'm like, I technically don't have to. Of course I do because she's like my bestie, but I'm like, oh, I should let my mom know that I'm going to hang out with my friends tonight. You don't need to let her know that. Like,
No.
it's
Mm-mm.
so weird. It
Yeah.
really is. It's
It's
strange,
very
but
odd.
very
Yeah.
exciting things. And I feel you on the
Yeah.
business stuff too, with just like allowing it to be just to slow down a little bit and
Yeah,
not
and
feel
allowing it to
guilty
be
about,
fun. Yeah, and
yes,
I think
yes.
sometimes like the end result comes when you kind of take the pressure off of yourself. And I think that I've spent way too much time over the last couple of years being anxious and feeling this unnecessary pressure to grow a certain amount by a certain timeline because I made that up in my head and all of that. So I'm kind of just excited to take the pressure off a little bit and see like what I'm excited to work on.
Yeah,
So we'll
I
see.
love that.
But
Yay.
okay, with that, that brings us to the end of today's Q&A. This is your reminder to leave questions on all of our Spotify episodes if you want your questions to be read in this episode. But with that, thanks for tuning into the podcast and until next week.